Welcome to Sexplainer. Today we're diving into what is literally one of the most heavily debated and scrutinized texts in the entire New Testament. For centuries, theologians, scholars, and everyday believers have wrestled with this single phrase spoken by Jesus, a phrase that, at least at first glance, seems to completely contradict his own incredibly strict teachings on marriage. So we're going to unpack the Catholic understanding of marriage by analyzing the historical context, the original Greek language, and the primary text to finally solve this mystery.
Okay, let's look at our agenda for today. 1. The Matthew 19 exception. 2. Reversing the old law. 3. The disciples' shocked reaction. 4. Solving the exception clause. And finally, 5. Absolute indissolubility of marriage. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The Matthew 19 exception, also known as the puzzling loophole.
So, did Jesus actually make an exception for divorce in Matthew 19:9? That's the million-dollar question we're answering today based on our source text. In this passage, Jesus says, whoever divorces his wife, except for unchastity, and marries another, commits adultery. Now that little phrase right there, except for unchastity, that's the lightning rod. You know, since the 16th century, a lot of non-Catholic groups have pointed to this exact clause and basically said, look, Jesus left a built-in loophole for divorce and remarriage if things get really bad. But does that interpretation actually hold water when we look closely at the full biblical context?
Section 2. Reversing the old law. Moses versus the new covenant.
Okay, so let's set the stage historically. In Matthew 19, the Pharisees come up to Jesus and they're specifically trying to test him. They want to trap him. They ask, is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause? Now they're leaning heavily on an old covenant concession here. Back in Deuteronomy 24, Moses actually permitted divorce and remarriage. But Jesus, he evades the trap brilliantly. He just doesn't take the bait. Instead, he points way past Moses, right back to the dawn of creation. He actually quotes Genesis, reminding them that God designed marriage to be completely permanent, saying, "What therefore God has joined together, let no man put asunder." And when the Pharisees push back, asking, "But what about Moses?" Jesus clarifies that Moses only allowed that as a temporary, stopgap concession because of the Israelites' hardness of heart. Jesus is effectively revoking that lower standard of the old law entirely and restoring marriage to its original, unbreakable integrity.
Which brings us to Section 3, the disciples' shocked reaction, the crucial clue.
Now, what's really fascinating about this slide is the absolute incredulity of the disciples. Literally right after Jesus drops this teaching on marriage, including that supposed loophole clause, his own disciples say, if such is the case of a man with his wife, it is not expedient to marry. They are entirely stunned.
So why the massive shock? Well, our source material makes it incredibly clear. The disciples' reaction proves they understood Jesus was leaving absolutely zero room for divorce and remarriage. Just think about the logic for a second. If Jesus was merely confirming an already existing loophole for divorce, his teaching wouldn't have been revolutionary at all, right? The disciples wouldn't have batted an eye. But his teaching was so much stricter than any of his Jewish contemporaries, he raised the bar so high that the disciples essentially concluded, whoa, if the bond is truly unbreakable, maybe it's safer just to embrace lifelong celibacy. That incredibly shocked response from his closest friends is a huge textual clue. It confirms Jesus definitely wasn't handing out exceptions to dissolve a valid marriage.
Section 4. Solving the exception clause. Except for unchastity.
So if Jesus wasn't offering a loophole, what in the world did he actually mean by except for unchastity? To answer that, we're looking at a great primary source document, an essay from the Ignatius Catholic Study Bible. It details how, over the centuries, Catholic exegesis has tackled this specific passage. Now, the Church doesn't officially mandate just one singular interpretation of this exact clause, but it does recognize three main permissible interpretations. And what makes these three views valid is that they all successfully harmonize that exception clause with Jesus' revolutionary zero-tolerance policy on divorce and remarriage.
But before we dive into those views, we really need to zoom in on the original Greek language. The word translated as unchastity in Matthew 19:9 is porneia. Now, porneia is kind of a broad term, but our sources point out it has very specific applications in biblical contexts. It can mean straight-up adultery, which is how it's often used in the Greek Old Testament, or it can refer specifically to incest, unlawful unions between close relatives, like we see in Leviticus 18. Keep that Greek definition in your back pocket because it is the absolute key to unlocking the historical views we're about to unpack. Let's see how this language builds our understanding and systematically lay out these three distinct theological solutions. Step 1, the Patristic View. Step 2, the Levitical Law View. And Step 3, the no comment view. All right, let's break down exactly how each of these works.
because it brilliantly illustrates the depth of biblical scholarship here. First up, the Patristic View. This was held by several early church fathers, and it interprets porneia as adultery. Basically, they argue that in cases of really serious sexual sin, Jesus allowed for physical separation, like a legal arrangement where you live apart, but he never ever permitted breaking the actual marriage bond, and definitely no remarriage. You can separate, sure, but you are still 100% married. Second, we have the Levitical Law View, which interprets porneia as incest. In this scenario, except for unchastity translates to except where unlawful unions exist. If a couple is too closely related, the union violates biblical law, so severing that relationship doesn't actually break a true marriage bond, because, well, a valid marriage literally never existed in the first place. As our source points out, this is pretty much the biblical equivalent of a modern-day annulment. And finally, the no comment view. This reading suggests Jesus is just completely bypassing the Old Covenant debates entirely. Here, except for unchastity just means regardless of the Old Testament grounds for divorce. Since Jesus is completely abolishing Moses' old concession, he's just refusing to even comment on the old rules. He shifts the focus completely back to God's original perfect design.
And that brings us to our final synthesis in Section 5, Absolute Indissolubility of Marriage, the New Covenant Sacrament.
So the absolutely crucial point here is this. It really doesn't matter if you lean toward the Patristic view, the Levitical view, or the no comment view. The end result is exactly the same. Every single one of these views faithfully upholds Jesus' core prohibition. He threw out the temporary concessions of the old law and restored marriage to its original, pristine purity. And even more than that, he elevated it to a new covenant sacrament. According to the text, this spiritual bond is forged by God himself. That means no human authority, civil or religious, has the power to break it, period. It's dissolved only by the death of a spouse. To divorce and remarry while your spouse is still alive, that equals adultery. And this incredibly high standard exists for a beautiful reason. Married couples are now called to be a literal earthly image of Christ's enduring, unbroken love for his church.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought to consider. If sacramental marriage is truly designed to be an earthly image of Christ's enduring, unbreakable love for his church, could a true covenant ever really be dissolved? When you really think about the absolute awe and shock of the disciples and the sheer theological gravity Jesus applied to the union of man and woman, the mystery of Matthew 19 doesn't resolve into some convenient loophole. It resolves into a profound, beautiful promise of permanence. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep seeking the truth in the text.